Good evening and welcome to Monkeys with Fire. How is everybody today? We've got a packed chat already. You've all found your seats, you're sat down, you're waiting for our Shifu to come on in and give us our instructions this evening. As you are well aware, tonight we have a very special stream. Our friend of the channel, Pascal Rosa, is going to be doing a painting workshop with us. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Pascal.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Excellent. So can you maybe just give us a quick summary of what tonight's workshop is going to be about?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to be telling about how lights and shadows are being placed on a model. And for that, I'm going to do some theory first. I'm going to be drawing with a pen just to make some sketches and schematics on how things work. So I'm going to do a bit of theory first, just drawing how things should be. And then we're going to go off to the model. And I've got a big Games Workshop ogre here to show it on, and it's not really the best model whatsoever, but it's got really big volumes so that I can really show perfectly how things are done. So yeah, and that's actually the whole thing.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'm eager to go, and I take it all the chat, you're all ready? You've got your pens and paper? You're all sitting comfortably? Yeah, May saying yes, tell us, Sensei. Right, well, there we go then. I hand the mic over to you, Pascal.
Thank you very much. I'm going to switch to the other camera right now. So please tell me if it's going all right, because we already established I'm a complete noob at this. Okay, so this is all quite a new setup, and it's all work in progress, I guess. But there we go. Picture this. I want you to see the world only in spheres from now on, right? Everything you're going to see is a sphere, spherical shapes. As long as you're going to see these spheres everywhere, in every detail and in every big picture, you're going to be all right. So this is where I start to draw. There's a circle. You can see that, right? So please talk to me
yes,
back,
yes.
Monkey.
Okay. All good.
You're going to be my guide in this, okay? So, all right. So, if you're a beginner and you're going, let me turn it around like this. If you're a beginner, we're all going to think about where does the light come from, and it's always from above, right? So this is where light comes from, and then it goes down. So this is called the zenithal light. And zenithal light only means it's coming from a zenithal position from right above. So for this theory, it's best to think of it like this. So when the light comes from the top, what do you know about lights and shadows? Lights on top, shadows below. Pretty obvious, right? But when we're gonna think about where does the shadow start, this is where most people go wrong. They're gonna divide it in equal parts, quarters, like this, and they're gonna say, well, like this is from here to here probably is the base color, your main color. Then your highlight starts here with the brightest highlight over there, and this is all shadow. And if you're going to do it like that, this is probably realistic, but we're working with miniatures, right? And miniatures are really small, and we're looking at them from the top. So if you're looking from this angle, you're never going to see this. So the only thing you're going to see is midtone and highlights. And so your overall view of the model will be too bright because you're not seeing the dark tones. Okay? So we've got to exaggerate every aspect of light and shadows in this part. So when this is half, what I do is I'm going to start with my shadows over here already. So this is the first bit where I'm going to put my brush in, and I'm going to work it downwards to there. And then I'm going to do the highlights later on, and I'm going to start over here. I'm going to work it up there. So there's only this small part that's going to be my midtone, my basic tones. and the rest is either highlight or shadows. And why does this work? Because your eyes are going to make an average of these colors, and then it needs more shadows, then it's going to need highlights, and so the highlights are stronger than the shadow tones. So this equals this, actually, creating a midtone, and so your eyes are going to see the entire midtone, but with lively shadows and highlights. You still bear with me?
Absolutely, yeah. You keep going.
I'm going to do the same thing, but now I'm going to draw it in, so you can see a bit of what it looks like. So this is half, this is about a quarter. So let's say my pen is now my shade color, and I'm going to start here, and in the beginning it's going to be very thin, so it's very transparent, and so the midtone is going to seep through it. So my shade's not very dark yet, and the farther I come below, my shade's going to be darker, 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 and here it is black or near black. And this is really big, and whatever color you're using, it's black or near black, with a tiny exception maybe for very bright white colors like cloth or something, right? Okay, so that's the shadow. Now let's say this blue pen is my highlight. It's going to be looking pretty awkward, but it's going to work. So I'm going to start my highlight over here. Really thin first, but brighter at the end. So this is the theory on a flat surface. Okay, going to do it again. Again, yes, again. Because we're not working with flat surfaces, we're working with spheres. So if I'm doing it from lights to, let's say, the shadows over here, so this is the shades, and these are highlights, I've got to also do it in this shape, you know, because there's the light, so I've got to make it rounder. So in fact, I'm doing these kinds of shapes, and these angles, and every part is going to be dark to light, but my shade color is still in here. It's very much above the half, right? So this is my half. There we go. And my highlights, I'm going to start here. It's going to be all the way up top. So this is how it works in a 3D environment. Going to do it again. Well, now we're working with, now we know how the spheres are working. We've got to see those spheres in everything we do. So take a look at my finger, and you see that this very top part is a sphere. Maybe an elongated sphere, but this part only itself is a sphere. So I can paint this in the way like I just described. Shades starting up to probably somewhere around here. I hope you can see it. Maybe a bit closer. So I start my shades somewhere up right there, going through there. My highlights are going to be there until there, all the way up the top, right? But as the same as I can see this as a sphere, so too I can see my entire finger as a sphere. So even better, I can see my entire hand as a sphere. So the hand in its entirety is going to be darker to light, right? Still dig me?
Oh, still with you. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, there we go. So we're going to get this sphere, but we're also going to get this sphere as a whole, where you've got to notice that if let's say I'm holding my hand like this, or like this, that this sphere, where now as I'm holding it right now, this is the lightest part, this is going to be the darkest part, that this darkest part is going to be lighter because it's than this darkest part because it's much closer to the light. Yeah? So in overall view, you've got to still consider how dark is your darkest part going to be in consideration with the other part. If I can do this sphere and I can do this sphere in a bigger shot, then I can also see the entire model as a sphere, being light at the top and darker at the bottom, right? And just as same, it's going to be very dark at the bottom, and in truth, whoever cares about shoes, And it's going to be very bright at the top because that's where the face is, and which is most interesting to do. All right. So we've got 3 levels of consideration to in these spheres. If you get all 3 levels just right, you're going to have a really lively model. So how's that going to look on a model? Let's say we're doing a piece of arm where there are a lot of muscles, and this is why I chose the orc, because I got really bulging muscles that interact with each other. So I've got one muscle over here, and there's another muscle on top of that. Maybe even another smaller muscle from the shoulder. Not really good at drawing here, but let's say it's like this. Let me get it right into the camera, so something like this. Light's coming from here. So this is a sphere. I'm going to make a highlight over here. I'm going to start my shading over there. And you see it, my shades, my darkest shades are going to be along this line. Now we've got this sphere, where if I see it as a complete sphere, this is going to be my highlight, the brightest part over here. And if I put a small line of very near white along this edge, it's going to contrast nicely with the darkness. And then I'm going to go darker again. Something like that. Right? So you're going to see light to dark, and again, light to dark. There we go. And when I'm going to put my highlights in, this is where I want to focus. Along this edge. Along this edge. Just putting that white pinstripe over there is going to make the muscles or the separate components pop from each other and still make a whole. Now, if I'm doing this as a big piece, I've still got to consider that my brightest highlight over here is going to need to be much brighter than this. If this is an arm, this is probably all the same. But if this would be the head of the model and this would be the foot of the model, then this highlight is much brighter than this highlight. This highlight may be as bright as this midtone, right? But then again, this shade may be just as dark as this midtone, where these shadows are going to be much darker than here, because they're closer to the light, and this is closer to the shadows. Right? Any questions about this?
No, this is excellent and a perfect pause. Thank you very much, Vindicator9, for joining the channel. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am, and everybody else for that matter.
Right. So this is the theory. Now you all got it. Now I'm going to go home. No, kidding. I'm going to show you how to work on it, and I've got a model. I've got it with a skin tone. Whatever I'm going to do, it's not about the color, right? I'm going to use weird colors, or I'm going to use weird paints, and you might say, oh, I don't have that paint, but I've got this color. It's not about the colors tonight. If you want to do a color theory, we're going to do it another night, but not tonight. It's just about seeing how to work the shades and the highlights. All right? So let's do some painting. Oh, there we go. I've started to base color the entire ogre with a just a kind of, oh, keep the camera steady, a kind of flesh tone, which is this one. Here we go. And what I would like to do, and this is what I always do actually, is I start off with my mid-tone, the color I want it to show. This is the color I want my ogre to be. If your eye is going to make the average, like I explained earlier, I want your eye to see this color. All right. So I'm going to, I'm always starting with my base color. This color is what I want, and then I'm going to do the shades first. Probably 1 or 2 layers, or 1 or 2 shades of shadow. Then I'm going to do a highlight shadow. And from that point on, I can always decide, do I want my shades being more dark? Do I want my highlights being more light? And in this way, I always got control how much I want to fidget with the lights and the shadows. Whereas if you start with your darkest color first, probably prime black, and I'm going to work up from my shades all the way up to my highlights, there is a possibility that you're not going to come out correctly. Either you're going to have too much or too little mid-tone areas, right?
Just to interrupt you a second, Pascal. So
Yep.
Amberden's asking a question. Won't you get shadows cast by your higher spheres onto the top of the sphere below it?
Yes, in real life, but that's somebody called it once fucking an ant. Sorry, excuse me for my language, but it's tiny, teeny tiny stuff, and your model is small already. So working with shadows created by objects themselves is overthinking it. Right? You can do it, and it is possible, but then you're going to work at larger scales and at display painting at high level stakes. I've seen Banshee do it the other day. Really wonderful. Nobody even noticed that it wasn't a real shadow. So it can be done, but certainly on these types of models, it's just overthinking it.
So is there an element of when you're painting you're not necessarily trying to achieve realism, it is a sort of false realism given the scale of the model?
Exactly.
Right.
You've got to trick the eye. Right? So, okay, your question answered? Hope so. I'm gonna put on a dark red. This is a sanguine base from P3. And now I see I've missed, I forgot to get some paper. So I'm going to do that in a minute. And I'm going to mix that in my base color. I always try to do some mixing of my base colors. Going to mix up a bit. I hope you can see the color as well. A bit more. There we go. I'm going to make it pretty. It's almost becoming a glaze. This is just how I like to work. You don't need to do this, but it's how I like to work. Let me take a step back. I've got a trick. This is the way I was taught it when I first did it. I'm going to take probably my darkest color. I think I'm going to be even darker afterwards, but I'm going to take the unmixed color. I'm going to do some lines first. I'm going to try to separate each and every single element in these muscles. There we go. I hope I'm going to keep it good in the camera. Please tell me if I'm holding my mini wrong and you cannot see it properly or something.
No, your positioning's absolutely fine. So just a quick question. What brush are you using? What size of brush?
This is Winsor Newton Series 7. I think this is the size 1.
Okay, and Snowyak is asking, do you always start like that? As in, is this your typical painting practice when you sort of face a new model?
Well, I don't do the stripes anymore. What I'm doing right now, but this is actually good practice to see each and every element in a good way, to have them separated and think about them as separate elements. It really helps thinking, especially in the beginning. You see, there's a little bulge over here, this little muscle. So you've got to separate that out. It's going to help you think about how each element is going to work. And because this is my darkest color, this is going to help me put the shades in the right place.
Super Sarah is asking, does your lady paint as well?
Nope. No, she tried it once. She did some goblin armies, liked it a bit, and then she was completely done. And well, she's more into horses actually. So, yeah.
Okay, obviously, chat, keep on firing your questions over. I will relay them to Pascal as he's
I'm going to do this side only, if you're okay with that, because I don't need to do the entire model. But here you see every element popping out at themselves, right? So you got a question?
We're all good at the moment, so you carry on.
Right. So now I'm going to start doing my first shades, and which is this color here. There we go. Did you see that on my finger? This is why painters do this. It's 3 ways to see if my wetness is correct, also to see how transparent my paint is. If I can see my own skin or my own nail through it, I know it's how transparent it's going to be and if it is what I need. All right. So I'm going to take some of this and let's start over at this sphere first. So this is a sphere. Here's the light. I hope everybody's going to see this okay. This is going to be the lightest point. Here's going to be shades. And the way the light is working for myself is I already see that this part over here is going to be the darkest shade. So I'm going to fill that in already. But this is what I'm going to do. I've got to think of it as a sphere. And I'm going to see that this curvature is just the top half of the sphere. So I'm going to start over here and take it down. I'm not going to be too fussy about the fact that I'm going to see the transitions very good here, because I can always blend it away. I can also do much more glazing like that and do it like this. Can you see that all right?
If you carry on to paint it, and then maybe when you get to a point, bring it closer up, that might be a good idea. Snowyak is asking, how do you decide how dark the shadow is? In this case, you used the sanguine color. So what by comparison to the mid-tone flesh, why did you choose that particular color as your shadow?
Experience, I guess, and some tips and help from more experienced painters. So when I was being taught this exact same theory, this is exactly the same color they advised me to use for skin tone, and actually for a lot of other colors as well, like for blues and greens. Adding this color into your mid-tone creates a really rich and nice shadow, which is really bizarre.
I think that's possibly another workshop, isn't it? The whole sort of color theory and right. How colors complement one another.
Right, definitely. I think that's a complete study in itself.
Yes.
So I think you can already see what I've done here. Can you see it?
If you want to bring it up slightly closer, let's just, I don't know how you, yeah, we can see better there.
Okay. Because it's a really thin paint and sort of a glaze, I can add more layers, but in the beginning I'm going to do a couple over here, going to start them over here, but then to darken it I'm going to start lower and lower and lower. I'm going to go to this part, and because the curvature is very much the top of the sphere, so if I would draw it further, it would be a big sphere, and then halfway it would be around here, you know, the top would be here and halfway would be here. So we've got to take that into consideration. So there's just a little bit of shades going to be here. But because I'm working like in this angle, I might just exaggerate that a bit. this way. Because this is the top part, I want to keep it light. I'm not going to do too much there. But yeah, there was the question about when do I go darker or lighter. That's a bit of preference as well. If you want a really dark miniature, you're obviously going to pull that shade up a bit more. So your shades are going to be bigger, so the entire model is going to be darker. If you want a much more happy peppy kind of ambience, then it's going to be a bit less.
So you've been talking about spheres on how to break up the model into various areas for the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows. But how do you then approach angular items?
But actually, you can see angled, or let's say square shapes like tanks or like blocks or whatever, also as a sphere. But the thing is, I'm going to do this with pen and paper for a second. Okay. So if you're going to think about a circle as all these different kinds of points where there's a vector, and the mathematicians and the science geeks among us know what I'm talking about. So every point on that circle is a vector that's going to be a straight line, right? So when you've got a square, this line is this point on that circle. So if you're going to think about the circle as what color is it going to have on this very specific spot, this angle is going to be that color. So this angle is going to be this color, right? This angle is going to be that color, and so on and so on. So here's your deeper shade, etc., etc. But then if you're thinking in 3D, you've got to be a bit creative, because if the light's exactly from above, it's going to be dull, because this side is going to be exactly the same color as that side as all the sides around. So in this case, my advice is always to think as the light just a bit askew from the top. All right. So in that, if you're looking at it like that, this side is going to be a bit lighter than this side and this side. So let's say the brightest part is number 1. That's the brightest part. So this would be number 2. This and this might be number 3. This would be darker, and this is the darkest, number 5. So you've got various tones, and you can work with that. Now take it one step further. Let's say we're going to angle the cube even a bit towards the light. Then all of a sudden, every angle is going to have a little gradient, and you can make that as wild and as interesting as you can. And this is what you see a lot on airbrush tanks. That every panel is going to be gradient. Now, if you're going to do that too stark, and it's going to be fake. And this is what bothers me about a lot of these tanks that you're going to do. Does that make sense?
Amazing theory, but don't start designing tanks anytime soon.
No, thank you. So, okay. So yeah, that's about the thing about flat lines, and it works best when you've got really stark contrasts. You know, this is a gradient, so you're going to see an even transition from one color to the other. But in fact, you're going to see it later. My brightest spot and my darkest spot is going to be miles apart. But because there's a transition, you're gonna blend it yourself. If you're gonna do it as two sides against each other, brightest spots, darkest spots, it's gonna pop, you know. So yeah, that's tanks. Then there's always things like edge highlights and stuff like that.
I get the impression that Vindicator might be one of your students.
Yeah, I had a workshop last weekend, yesterday, and did a beginner's course with the Space Marine, right?
Right, excellent.
So in the meantime, I'm gonna come back with my base color for a bit, just to even out some transitions here, like this one. And because I'm really thin, it's gonna blend itself. There we go. Well, for a quick job, and this is as much as I'm gonna do. So this is my first stage. Let's see. May not be the best blend ever, but it's gonna be about showing you what I'm doing. A bit more there. If you're gonna look, this entire part of the back is a lot of shade color. But if you're gonna think about the curvature, it's going back already. So a lot of it is gonna be in the shadows, right? Whereas this little bulge over here has got a top part where the curvature is more on top. So it's got to be light over there, and it's got to be light over there as well. So this is my first layer. It's already pretty dark, but I just want to see what's going to happen when I make it much more darker. So I'm going to put some more of my dark color in here. This much darker here, and I could also do just a hint of, oh, sorry for the camera, just a hint of black. Could also use blue for that matter, but let's do blue. So this is blue I'm putting in is dark sea blue, this here. That's a really nice color. I'm gonna take just a little bit. I'm gonna put it there. There we go. With this darker shade, I'm gonna do the darkest parts of the shades. So in here. Making sure to take the underneath the muscle, not on top of the next, right? This part is going to be very dark. This is going to be very dark. So now I'm seeing that this line I did in the beginning stage is going to be is too wide. Not being careful about that, and so it's going to interfere. So I just take my first highlight, my first shadow. Sorry, I'm going to try to even that out. And then I'm going to conclude that I'm way too high with my shades. Probably not, but then again, that's not a problem because I always can come back to my base color and even it out. Right. So how's that looking for you?
Yeah, we can definitely see that it's starting to build up, isn't it?
There we go. Yep.
Yeah.
So these shades are looking pretty okay to me. Maybe I'll come back to it later, but first of all, I want to go to the highlights because I want to really see those images pop. And so, well, for skin tone, the best thing to use is actually some kind of off-white, but I'm going to be a bit quicker about this. I'm using scale color white, and for skin, scale color is really excellent because it's really matte. It's going to bring that madness into the skin. If I really want to pop it with real white, I'm going to use Vallejo white later on. But first, here's my white. There's my base. Actually, the reason I want to use an off-white. It's because there's yellow in there, which makes the skin a bit warmer. But that's about skin color theory. Sorry about the shaking, guys. There we go. Oh, that's really old. Yeah, that's better.
Memno, so what is Pascal's Instagram? It literally is Pascal Rosa.
There we go.
So just type his name out, you will find him. It will have an image of Tinkerbell.
Yeah. And what is there? You're not going to see it now. So the trouble with highlights, and especially highlights where you're adding whites, is that white is really high in pigment. So it's really opaque. Highlights are easier, shades are easier for me than highlights because they're easier to blend in. But we'll see. So this is my first highlight. And I'm going to take them all the way up top. And this is the thing. I'm going to go towards the lightest point. So like shades, you're always going to go painting towards the darkest part. Highlights, you're always going to paint towards the lightest part. And now I want to make this part pop out from that part. So this is why I'm going to do a bit of an edge along that dark line there. Maybe you're not going to see it right now, but later on with a brighter highlight, you're definitely going to see that. There we go. This is all going to be light. And this is the interesting part, because there's going to be a lot of light on this part of the shoulder. I'm going to take it all the way up. You see that I'm starting over here actually pretty low, but because of the transparency, you're going to show it, you're going to see it only in here. I'm not going to be fussy about the fact that I may start too low with my highlights, because again, I can always come back with my base color and smooth out that transition. And already you're starting to see that there's going to be much more light over here now, and how each and every muscle is going to pop out from each other. And this is what I tried to tell you about when you were working with your shooting. You did some muscles, and you were working up against the shade of the next bulging muscle. And I told you to put the highlight really against that.
Yeah, as I'm watching this, I'm sort of realizing that I could probably end up doing that model again. but fortunately,
Yeah.
I have the perfect model for next month, and so you're going to be watching me like a hawk as far as have I learnt anything, because it is absolutely all of what you're doing now is in that model.
Right. That's cool. So you're seeing how I'm putting my bright highlight against that darkest part over from the next muscle. Because of that high contrast, dark against light, that's how these parts are going to be separated from each other.
So Memno's asking the really important questions here. Is Pascal a brush licker?
No. yes, I am. Very much so. I don't recommend it to anyone. Like Vindicator knows, I told this yesterday as well. Do as I say, don't do as I do. I brush I lick my brush, but don't copy me. Just stick to the theory I'm telling you. So yeah. this is interesting. So you've got this really dark part of the back, and just by putting a little pinprick of light over here, you can see that little dimple, that little bulge bloop, and then going back to a shade. But it's really popping out right now. There we go. So that's my first highlight, and this is really great for setting up the volumes. And now I'm going to finish it off probably with a very bright near white highlight. There we go. And it depends on what color you're using or what you're aiming at, but it's going to be white or near white. So this is near white on my finger there, at least. And this is going to be very thin, really in those spots that are catching the light really, really hard. So I did a little, just a speck of white on here, but in hindsight, following my own theory, it might be too bright. And as I'm looking at it, yeah, it's too bright. So I'm going to go back with a shade color. There we go. Really going to make it like a glaze. I'm just going to glaze over it. Beep. Just to tone it down a bit. Maybe a little more. Yeah, hardly did anything.
But a good thing about it, as you're saying, is that most of your paints here are glazes, aren't they? So you're just building them up. You're not losing any detail from it.
Exactly. Actually, I'm doing a pretty thick glaze actually at the moment, just because I want to speed things up. You don't want me to see building just this part up in the coming 15 minutes. So I've got to speed it up so you can still see the effect. If I really want to do a high-end display model, I can really be doing 15, 20, 25 layers of the same color in a really, really thin glaze, just to get it right, just to get a great gradient and blending, etc.
Right, so hello Flick. Question for Pascal. When selecting a skin tone range, do you think about the colours around the skin on the clothes, etc. before you start? Or do you go with anything you fancy regardless?
The latter. Yeah. No, I never. Well, no, that's not true. This is a bit about color theory. So when I first get a model, I'm going to think about what colors I would like to use and what's going to be in there. And for that to do, I've got to isolate. I've got to see which parts are going to be in there. So like a little belt is not going to be important in this, but a piece of cloth, the skin, the armor, etc. So the really big parts that are going to show that I want to get attention to. So then I often get 3 or maybe 4 colors that I've got to choose, and I've got to take into consideration, is the skin going to be part of that? So in this model, obviously the skin is going to be a great part that's going to be in that color wheel. So in that case, I've got to treat it as a red, because there's always red in skin tone. No matter how bleak or how dark I'm going to make it, there's always going to be red in there. Unless you're going to do a zombie or a vampire, of course. So I've got my reds. If I'm going to do red trousers there, the contrast is going to be too low. So if I want to do this model, I can distinguish 3 parts. So that's the skin, that's the pants, and that's metal. And metal in this area is always like a non-color. So I can nullify it. It's going to be dark. It's going to be black. It's going to be colorless, even if I try to paint in colors as a reflection. So I can discard it as a part of the model. So in this case, I've only got two colors. I've got my reds over here, and then I've got to think about what color is going to fit well with that. And I've done this org before, and I took something like this. On red and blue, that's a cold and warm contrast. It's going to be pretty good. I could also do something like this, emerald, which has a tint of blue, which has that contrast of warm and cold, but it's also the complete opposite in color wheel from red and green. So that's a second contrast. If I want to add more contrast, I'm going to do a very saturated green. Right. Let's say this. This is very bright, very flashy, whereas the skin is going to be pretty dull, pretty matte, right? So I've got my, there's not so much blue in this one though, but I've got my warm and cold. I've got my contrasting colors in the color wheel. I've got my finishing in saturation, desaturation contrast. So I've got 3 contrasts already, and that's going to be very interesting.
So yeah, Flick's just saying you're talking about temperature here, red skin tones, so blue tones, colder colors. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is if you really want to make an interesting piece, you try to incorporate 2 or 3, at least 2, maybe 3, 4, if you're lucky, even 5 types of contrast in a model to make it interesting. So you've got your temperature, you've got your color wheel, you've got finishing like matte and gloss, you've got saturation, you've got textures, you've got well, etc. etc. There's so much things you can do with contrast. The more you can bring into those, even with only 2 colors, red and something else, yeah, you can really make it interesting. I'm playing a bit with the light here to make my lamp a bit darker. It's going to make the colors a bit more like I see them on the screen. But I'm nearly there. The thing I want to do now is I've put on some Vallejo white here. Vallejo white is a bit more glossy, well, satin maybe, than the Scale 75, which makes it more white, which is really weird because the other one is also white. But in the end, it's going to be whiter than Scale 75. And I'm only using this on the very brightest spots, and actually this is only to emulate like the light source. It's going to be there. Okay. Well, and that's pretty much it. There we go. So this is all about theory on creating a volumes I want to create. This is not necessarily about skin tones, because if I want to do really something more with the skin tones, I can take this even further, add in some greens and blues and reds as well. But that's a story for another time, I guess. But yeah, this is it.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Pascal. It was brilliant. So have a good evening, and we shall see you soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And guys, thank you for being there. Really loved all your reactions and seeing that you're really positively influenced by this. And that's something I'm taking to heart, really. And so I'll hope to see you again someday again. So probably with the next miniature. And have a nice evening.
Okay. Bye-bye for now then.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
And there we go. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining in on tonight's stream. It's been really, really good. And I shall see you tomorrow from 7 o'clock BST. Until then, bye for now.